So welcome, Joanna. We so appreciate your consistent visionary leadership and all that you do for so many. And at Setsi, as always, we begin by acknowledging, giving thanks to our creator, acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Joanna, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Hey, thanks, Victor. It's lovely to connect with you on this cold January afternoon. I'm joining you from Takaronto, and yeah, I work for an organization called Makeway, and our mission is to build solutions and partnerships to help nature and communities thrive together. And we are an organization that, on one hand, is able to support community-led organizations or projects, and we provide all the HR, finance, compliance, governance support for them, strategic support, and also try to, help them grow their fundraising base. So that's kind of one part of Makeway. And the other part of Makeway is we host hundreds of little foundations known as donor-advised funds or community-advised funds, where communities have wanted to put their monies inside Makeway so that we can help them do their granting or community supports. But then we also have a whole focus on grant making. As a public foundation, that's the other side of our shop. As a public foundation, we raise money from institutional funders and individuals, and our grant making goes over 90% to remote, northern, rural, indigenous communities. So I think we're connected to now, in relationship with something like 210 indigenous communities across this country, coast to coast to coast. So that's a little bit about Makeway. I've been in the organization for coming up to 5 years. I cannot believe that's happened. And I come with experience with Greenpeace, with a global environmental campaigning organization. Before that, I used to run a big international humanitarian and justice organization out of South Africa that worked with some of the most marginalized communities around the world. Called Action Aid, so people might have known of that. I used to be with Oxfam, also a household name. And prior to that, I ran a big international women's rights organization called AWID. But my formative years were growing up in Tanzania, and I really got to understand, even though, we didn't have any particular privileges as working with the UN or anything like that, but I recognized white skin privilege from a very young age because of my experience there. So that's what got me into all of this justice, solidarity, international work, women's rights work. And so when I came to Makeway, it was like all of these issues coming together, and I could do all the things that I loved so passionately to do. So it's one of the best gigs I think that are out there.
Indeed. That's a remarkable journey. My goodness. Thank you so much for your candor and your leadership. And once again, all that you do for so many. Perfect segue to my next question. What's currently inspiring you right now? What has you curious? What keeps you up at night sometimes?
Well, I think what keeps me up at night is the fact that we are increasingly polarizing as a society. And so people are receiving their information and trusting from a smaller and smaller and smaller place. And the only way that we are going to kind of achieve health for all, justice for all, luxury for all, if you want to see it in those terms, is that we need to recognize that we are absolutely all interconnected. Right? We are connected to one another inside communities, across this country, across other countries, with other species. And what keeps me up is the ways in which people are increasingly fearful and are othering others, even in our sector, how we are othering others, because we can see injustice or hate or racism or discrimination upon us, and we'll move quickly to judgment and righteousness without actually understanding where all of this is coming from. So that's what worries me. But as of course we know the antidotes to it. It's all about building connection, and it's what you're doing, right? It's all about reaching out to others and trying to understand different perspectives. And so that's what keeps me hopeful and inspired, is because I am seeing the number of walls that are breaking down. I'm seeing the ways in which people are trying to build bridges. And because I have the opportunity to work so closely with so many phenomenal Black or Indigenous leaders, those that are just bringing in worldviews and new ways of thinking that are, that's that 7th-generation thinking that helps us understand that we humans, we are all part of nature. We are nature. We are weather, and we all hold a stake in everyone's future. And so I'm seeing kind of this cultural and language resurgence amongst Indigenous communities. I'm seeing the ways in which there's a real shift in consciousness. So it is these tensions that we hold, kind of the fear and the othering and the scarcity. And then I'm also seeing the connectedness, the bridge building, the curiosity, where love is winning. And so that's what keeps me going every single day, Victor.
Ashe, I couldn't agree more. We have to stay in a space of abundance, compassion, mercy, empathy, and grace, or else
Yeah.
we have no why.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I agree completely. Thank you so much for all those remarkable sentiments and the way you contextualized it. Absolutely remarkable. So my next question, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
I think, some of the challenges and barriers are that, there's obviously so much wealth out there, and there's so much philanthropic dollars out there. And if we could just untap them and unleash them to have more impact. And so I'd say that's a challenge, in that so many of those dollars are not being put to effective use. But I'd say the ways in which we're trying to tackle that challenge is to really inspire far more individuals and institutions to transform philanthropy. The more trust-based it is, the more, and trust-based can mean unrestricted funding, multi-year funding, highly relational, and understanding that change is by no means linear, and systems change is by no means, a focus where you've got to have these KPIs and these kind of outcomes. We actually have to understand root causes and build the kinds of, shift the kind of field and the ecosystem in a way that's going to require patience and many different learnings and failures along the way. So you're seeing more and more folks that are coming into that, understanding that, 1 + 1 isn't necessarily going to add up to 2 in the ways that you put money into the system, and that if you can trust frontline leaders and trust that they're going to invest in their communities because the issues are all interconnected, change is going to happen. So it's really how to influence grant making and philanthropy that way. And I think the other challenges, and you guys are, you know this all better than I do, but it's that how much capital is locked up inside investments that are actually doing more harm than good. And that the opportunity right now that exists to unleash that capital for impact investment that is good, that is going to, advance justice, is going to advance ecological resurgence and planetary healing. We in this country of Canada, we're still barely there. We're barely there, and it's shocking to me that these commitments were made back in 2010 for institutional foundations to have 10% of their endowments to be impact investment. I think from anecdotally what I've heard from folks, it's like if it's 2%, we'd be lucky. So I think another challenge is the fact that there has not been the speed in which we need to move and shift capital in the ways that we need to be doing it. But similarly to what some of you folks are doing, we are trying to shift the needle on this. We're also really trying to increase transparency around investment. So you'll be seeing more from Makeway around investor transparency. We ourselves are also working with many of our donor advised fund holders to figure out how they can use their funds to more strategic impact and mission aligned. Makeway's been fossil free for many decades, but yeah, there's way more we could be doing around all of this. And so with a bit of tenacity and a bit of humility, we're trying to move the sector like you guys are.
I love that tenacity. My grandmother used to always say, we need to hurry up and take our time. And I think
Yes.
that's what's needed right now. So my next question, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
Right. Yes. So Makeway, we have 7 very clear strategic priorities, and we brought out a strategic plan that's very easily found on our website. And those 7 strategic priorities are, let's see if I can remember them all: healthy lands and waters, Indigenous language and cultural resurgence, food system transformation, and that includes greater focus on food sovereignty. Support for bold, inclusive leadership across the country. 5, it's what we call fair earth living around climate action. So that's how do we shift cultures and behaviors. Shared economic well-being being number 6, and number 7 is transforming the philanthropic and charitable sector to be more equitable. We've got grant making and partnerships around all those 7. This year, as I step into 2024, I really want to, you guys work so much with elders. I'm not quite an elder, but I'm also a coach, and I do want to really support way more of my team and really support their leadership. So I really want to kind of step back and really help others step into their leadership. So that's going to be a focus for me this year. And certainly another focus for me is the climate crisis is right at our nose. It's just right here. And as someone who's been working on climate, I really want to double down on the work that we could be doing to figure out how to work on climate action that feels joyful, and really figuring out how we need to live differently with one another and the planet around shifts in culture and behavior. So I'm gonna be focusing way more on making that explicit, just because there's so much amazing work that's going on around climate action that is much more around like the shifts to renewables and all of the policy shifts that we need to do. But how do we work at the neighborhood, at the condo level, at the street level, where we're starting to shift the ways in which we live within the means of this beautiful Mother Earth that we live upon. So it's part cultural, it's part spiritual, it's part tactical, it's all the ways we can support each other to live differently.
That's beautiful. That would be music to my wife's ears. You
Oh,
can't
yeah.
put anything around her. She has this whole system of how we get rid of our waste. So thank you for that. That's It was remarkable. So my next question, how do you feel about the future of philanthropy in Canada? Are you optimistic? Are you hopeful? How do you feel?
I'm hopeful. And what are my data points for that, Victor? My data points are uh, seeing the demographics of leadership in philanthropy change. It used to be, not to offend anybody who might be listening, but pale, male, and stale. So it's now changing, and you're seeing diversity of players who have access and influence over a significant number of dollars. So that's only going to grow, I think, in terms of who we see in that space. Obviously, the one that you see moving the most quickly is the gender transformation. The number of women who are coming into wealth and are yeah, so it's a generational and a gender thing. That's the one that you're seeing the most obviously right now. And having just been part of a session on women in philanthropy, and to see how women are more attuned to trust-based philanthropy and systems change philanthropy. So that helps in moving some of this along. But yeah, there's still a bunch of folks that really want to hang on to the old ways of doing things. So, we got to keep at it to shake it up. As per my earlier comments. But generally, I think we're going in the right direction. Not fast enough for you and I, Victor, but you never know what kind of disruptions that'll come along, and where people will take big risky steps to shake up philanthropy more effectively.
Absolutely. We just saw the sister in Australia that just gave up, I think, $37 million to a community coalition because they wouldn't tax her inheritance. Like that
That's
is
right. That's
a
right.
remarkable testimony to what wealth and reallocation can look like when you're in tune with just justice and abundance. I mean, givers never lack, as my grandmother would also say. Givers
Yeah,
never lack. Yeah.
exactly.
So my next question is, or my second last question, I'd say, is what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
Well, I mean, I guess our ultimate goal would come straight out of our mission statements, in that nature and communities are thriving together, and that we are, that we're not dealing with social justice over here and climate action over here and nature regeneration over here, that we start to understand that One Health is what we all need to be working on together, and that what drives an economy is ultimately about centering care and well-being for all. That would be the goal. And for Makeway, kind of taking that down to the next level, the more resources that we are able to mobilize and put into the hands of communities who can drive change as per what is needed in their community, that bottom up, community-led solutions, where communities are thriving and are not surviving, where we have transformed economic systems and social systems and political systems, where we can, where we're really taking care of one another. And so yeah, I feel, I mean, I've never been more convinced of bottom up community led solutions, because context matters, right? And the more times where you see things that are imposed from above, and it's kind of a one size fits all, it's just never going to work. communities will know best what it is that they need. And so yeah, the more we can push for that, the more we can also push for kind of connection across systems, connection across issues, so that we get out of these very, very dangerous funding silos, which continue to separate, and therefore we don't actually tackle the systems, because you're just tackling a symptom or a piece of it.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Thank you. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the call to action would have to go back to what's keeping me up at night, right? So it's the extent to which how can each and every single one of us work towards building more bridges and more interconnections, um, across issues, across, you know, sitting down with someone that you might on the surface disagree with and find an area of agreement. It's how we help, because now people are only seeking out new information from those we trust. We need to have much bigger, more diverse circles of trust. And so how are we each going out and doing that, as opposed to, oh, I don't like what that person has to say, I'm not going to talk to them again. And that we're just going to get more and more and more insular, and our bubbles will get smaller, and we'll start tearing each other down. So that's my call to action. It's change will happen at the speed of trust, and those circles of trust have to be as big as possible.
Ashe, Ashe. Joanna, thank you so much for your guidance, your wisdom, you censoring intersectionality and interdependence, all the introspection and actionable insights you shared, and all that you do for so many. And as always at SETC, we close the way we began, by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much for all that you do for so many.
Thank you, Victor. Blessings.
Blessings indeed.